Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Soraya Mia, and you are tuning in to Astro AWANI LINC's webinar session to talk about safety during Cuti-Cuti, how to prepare when the borders open. And today I'm going to talk about traveling because it has been disrupted for some 2 years due to the global pandemic. And now finally the world is starting to see international travelings possible again. Now, some people, including me, are excited. Some are also confused. Some are a little bit still hesitant to travel overseas and to also accept international travelers in Malaysia. But this is the reason why we are having this webinar session to actually discuss the do's and don'ts, including the budgeting, insurance, how to get information about the countries that you wish to travel, and most importantly, the preparation of the local industry players to accept international travelers. Without further ado, I will be introducing the speakers for today. We have Johan Kamarudin, the editorial director of Gaya Travel magazine. We also have Gary Bowerman, the director of Check in Asia, and who is also a consumer trend and travel analyst, and Manoharan Paryasamy, who is the Senior Director of Tourism Malaysia under the International Promotion of Asia and Africa. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me today in Astro AWANI's webinar session. All right, so we are going to begin the topic today with Malaysia opening borders on April 1st. Of course, the requirements are being fully vaccinated and also PCR tests. A negative PCR test before departure. But the most important question that we are asking ourselves and also the industry players, what is the preparation like for the industry players, the local tourism industry players right now? Let's give this question to Mr. Manoharan.
Thank you, Mia. Actually, when the government announced of a border opening, everyone excited, especially the industry players, As a Tourism Malaysia, yes, we have keep on engaging with our industry locally as well as domestically. And domestically, yes, we have a lot of engagements with the industry players, right from the hospitality industries, hoteliers, the airlines, and tour operators, and a whole lot of people who's involved directly or indirectly with the tourism industry. What? The announcement from the government, announcement of the government, 1st April, we're going to open the border. Everybody excited, especially from the vaccination sites. Almost, if not 100%, 99.9%, all of them are fully vaccinated. And that is one of the criteria. All the industry players well aware that, they need to be vaccinated in order to ready to start their business. When the foreign travelers are coming in, the first questions the consumer or the foreign tourist is going to ask whether it is safe to go and stay in a particular place. How do people going to handle them? Is it safe to visit some of the product? So indulging in those activities. Those product owners, have they vaccinated? Have they SOP in a place and all those things? So before the government announcing the border opening, we have seriously engaged with entire industry players saying that SOP, the operating procedures must be adhered. That's very important. Everybody will be very cautious. We wanted to know what kind of SOP been applied or implemented in those hotels, for instance, whether the amenities has been sanitized or not, or you regularly do the sanitations on those part of it, and the attractions, product attractions places, do you follow the SOP? So all those things has been implemented. Right now, we are waiting for the foreign tourists to come to our show.
That's right. We are very, very excited and also hoping that the local tourism industry can be revived after the borders reopen. Now, Malaysia and Singapore, let's speak about the region, have actually reached an agreement to reopen borders. And we are expecting an announcement really soon, maybe within the next hour. But previously, to travel between these two countries for various reasons, businesses or any other reasons, was via the vaccinated travel lane or the VTL. But what does this mean to other countries who have yet to reach the similar agreement. As an example, Thailand. Maybe this one can go for maybe Gary.
Yeah, hi, good morning, Mia. It's an interesting point. I think the vaccinated travel lanes were used particularly by Singapore, but some other countries as well, to try and reintroduce travel in a calibrated way, so you can measure the number of people that come into a country or go out of a country day by day. As we've moved through this process of reopening, they now do look a little bit as though they're kind of a little bit outdated. Malaysia wants to open its borders to all comers, and that's great. But there are some restrictions. Obviously, some countries don't open their borders fully yet to Malaysia. As you mentioned there, Singapore is about to do so. So that's great, because Singapore it delivers more than a third of visitors each year to Malaysia. So that's a great boost. Thailand is very important. Mr. Manoharan will say this as well, not just for inbound travel, but Malaysia sends a lot of travelers to Thailand each year. So it's very important for two-way travel. My feeling is that these VTLs will be smoothed out over time. I don't think it will take long. I think once borders are open, every country now wants to rebuild their economies, rebuild their travel industries, and to do that need open borders. I think everybody recognizes that it's just some of the roadblocks in the way, but give it to the second half of this year. I think things will be pretty open, and we'll be able to travel much more freely than we would have hoped probably at the beginning of the year.
Absolutely. On the optimistic note, that is definitely, we are on the right track, the entire world perhaps. But there are still some doubts in terms of, possibly the risks of getting COVID, because COVID-19 is still, looming in communities. So let's talk a little bit more about budgeting. There, like I mentioned just now, if there is a risk of getting COVID, and PCR tests are also quite costly, imagine some families who have like a large family who want to go out to travel. So I'm going to ask Mr. Johan, how do we actually plan or a proper budgeting before we travel overseas?
Hello, good morning, Mia. Basically, when it comes to traveling right now, if one were to travel overseas, it requires a lot more preparation compared to actually do it domestically. So what I actually can suggest, among other things anyway, besides making sure anyway that you try to observe physical distancing, try to actually like maintain hygiene, making sure anyway you actually have a clean bill of health before you travel, is the fact that you make sure that you have enough budget. Right now, what we see is that the cost of traveling is actually going up. Right now, because of inflation, inflation itself is actually already the inflation has already been felt throughout all sectors of the economy, especially when you talk about traveling, because the cost of fuel rises, right? The cost of food rises as well. So you end up actually having to spend a lot more domestically. What more if you were to travel internationally? So when you talk about international travel, there's a lot more things that you have to research on. You have to make sure and then you're more prepared. Be sure to take actually your insurance, your actual insurance cover. When I say insurance cover, it's not only about travel insurance, but also insurance that actually like covers any travel disruptions relating to COVID-19. I just would like to relay with you actually my experience over in Dubai. I actually went there last December. Upon 2 days before flying back here, I contracted COVID, which was really mild. But the thing was, I have to make sure anyway that I have enough money in order to actually cover the cost of my quarantine stay. That cost of stay is not covered actually within that insurance, even within normal insurance, because I took Etika travel insurance. So they do actually have that kind of travel disruption. You can claim it actually afterwards. But that's the thing, you have to actually fork out your own money first, and you have to wait for it to be reimbursed a few months down the line. So you actually have to have that preparation as well. Make sure that you actually have enough space in your credit card in case anything happens. In case, you thought that you might not be able to get it, but the thing is, to travel back to Malaysia, because of that, you have to actually go through that testing itself. So if you are tested positive, automatically you actually need to go to isolation. So of course you're not hospitalized. You're not hospitalized, then you actually have to go and have to cover the isolation. You have to go to isolate yourself, be quarantined in hotels, and you have to foot the bill yourself. So it will be a lot less harrowing if you're actually covered by, if you go there for work, if you actually have a company that can help to cover those costs. But if you go on a leisure basis, you might want, in order to actually consider that risk as well. So there is actually that element, that risk, whereby it really inflates costs, and there's no way around it at the moment. Anyway, you have to actually bear it.
Yes, that's a very good point. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, Johan. We're going to speak more about insurance later on, but before we get to that, Malaysia's borders are going to be open, but certain countries, as we spoke of just now, have not yet reopened. Example like China, South Korea, and also Japan. So, Mr. Manharan, what is the procedure like for countries, travelers from overseas to actually come to Malaysia for traveling? What is the procedure from the home country to the travel destination, and where do people actually get the information from, the clear information?
Okay, thanks, Mia. With regards to the procedures, the government have eased down a lot of our procedures, compared to when we launched our Langkawi International Travel Bubble. Under the Langkawi International Travel Bubble, you need to do vaccinated for the 8 hours prior to departure. And upon arrival, you need to do a test. You need to do a test, and until you get the result, then only we can proceed for the immigrations and go on to Langkawi. And while you're staying in Langkawi, almost every day, you need to do a self-test and again, some professional tests. So the whole journey for you to travel under the Langkawi travel costs you a bomb. If let's say you travel with a family of 4, people say, the cost of getting tested under this COVID test alone will cost you easily $400 to $500. But when government announced our border opening 1st April, all those procedures has been eased down. Right now, you just need 2 days prior to depart. You do the RTK PCR test. And upon you arrive in KLIA or any point of entry, you just need to do a test 24 hours within your arrival. That means you can arrive, you don't have to do the test at the airport. You straight away can go to the immigrations and you declare whatever procedures need to be declared. In the case of foreign tourists, you need to download the MySejahtera applications. That is before you depart. Before you depart from those countries, you need to download our MySejahtera applications. And underneath there is a traveler icon, which has a lot of questions you need to answer. So that when you arrive at the KLIA or any international airport, you can straight away go to the immigrations, hassle-free. But nevertheless, we anticipate, there will be some kind of issues about those people don't know how to download the MySejahtera and so on. So we have our help desk to assist them together with our authorities there, airport authorities and all those people. We will have a help desk to assist them. But all these informations which we are telling you just now, which I'm telling you, it will be disseminated through our overseas office. We have a 30 overseas office, as well through our missions abroad. All of them will have, and also we update in the website. All our travel websites, either on immigrations or through our government-related website, saying that these are the procedures. But let's rest assured, this procedure is much more easier. Relax. As a matter of fact, government also will. We believe after a couple of months, if the government's looking at it, the 24 hours test, whether it need to be done or not. If there is no any spike in the cases from foreign tourists, most likely government will review into it. But at the moment, these procedures still stick to it, whereby upon you arrive, you need to do the test within 24 hours. That means you come to the airports, go to the immigrations, and you can straight away to check in. And while you're staying in the hotels, you can do the test within 24 hours. This is a professional test you need to do. And other than that, you are free to move around any of the destination. Your holiday started. Your holiday started, you just go and indulge in any activities you wanted to do. Those are the procedures. So we believe this will be much more an attractive procedures which the government have put it up. And we are engaging the entire airline industries. We are going through the associations of airlines, we call it AOC. airline operating committee. We are disseminating all the information so the airline also will educate their passengers. Their passengers before they travel. At least they can do the first line of a checking upon the checking in at the counter. At least they can see. They will ask the potential travelers whether have they download the MySejahtera apps and have they filled up all those the travelers questions under the traveler icon. Yes, Mia.
All right, just to deep dive further into, the sort of COVID SOPs for Malaysia and each country. So Malaysia expects the tourism to boost the economy, of course, after 2 years of being halted. But there are still the restrictions, such as Manohar explained just now, the maybe mask requirements and also MySejahtera and whatnot. Countries like Singapore actually have just announced that on the 29th of March, which is next Tuesday, they will lift most COVID restrictions. And also the Philippines have announced a while back that they've listed most COVID restrictions in the capital, Manila. And the tourism, the international tourism actually was boosted 40% since they reopened their borders as early as February 10th. So maybe, Gary, you can explain, how do we address, the limitations that, perhaps international travelers can consider to come to Malaysia during their next trip?
Yeah, it's a really good point. As you mentioned, that Singapore is moving, it looks towards, a full reopening. Some of the countries in our region, Cambodia, as you mentioned, the Philippines, Vietnam, pretty much similar now, that the very, very few restrictions. But I also agree with Mr. Manoharan, if you look at where Malaysia has come in recent weeks, it's made huge strides. And inevitably, the government, I think, is still a little bit cautious. It will test and see these processes perhaps over the first 2 months, see how they go. It may be that actual inbound arrivals for those first 2 months may be quite low anyway. So we can actually just test these processes and get them absolutely 100% right. And then perhaps for the second half of the year, pretty much everything will go back to normal. We would hope that will be the case. And I think that's really looking from what Kyrie has said, what the government is saying, is that we do actually have to test this out first and find out. Mr. Manoharan said we've had a lot of learnings from the international travel bubble in Langkawi. The numbers weren't great, they weren't particularly high, but we have learned a lot about how people are traveling. So I think that's one of the interesting things across the region is inbound numbers at the moment are still relatively low. The patterns of travel are still shaping up. This has been a global pandemic. This has disrupted travel globally. And coming into the region, traveling around the region, it's going to take time for these new patterns of travel, for people to become comfortable in traveling in different ways. And we haven't done this. I haven't traveled outside the country since January 2020. I think you're the same, Mia. And it's getting used to traveling again. We've got to fall back into those rhythms. And at the moment, I think this kind of safety net of having those tests in place, I don't really see that they're a barrier to travel into Malaysia. I think if you want to come to Malaysia, you still will. But you do still have that kind of safety net and security net for local people as they become used to international travelers coming back.
Just to add a little bit more, what about the neighboring countries, if we all kind of sort of reach an agreement to open borders so that international travelers, as far as from the US or the UK or Europe, want to come in, they can also travel in between countries. Do you think that's still a limitation? And how long do you expect this to actually be around?
Yeah, it is a limitation for long-haul travelers because long-haul travelers into Southeast Asia tend to like to visit at least 2 or 3 countries during a trip, not just do one country. And at the moment, the process of traveling between countries is still a little bit confusing. They're still a little bit difficult and they're still a little bit unsure. I go back to my original point. I think we're still learning, but I think by the second half of the year, if COVID-19 remains, the Omicron variant and we don't have another variant, I think we will start to see borders open more liberally across the region. And that's really important for ASEAN travelers to be able to travel within each other's countries as well. So it's going to start slowly. I think we have to accept that. But, we're building up towards the latter part of the year when we would expect bookings to increase. So yeah, upward scale, that's the hope, I think.
Mia, can I just add on what Gary was mentioning just now about the long-haul markets? Yes, we yet to see. Previously, yes, a lot of long-haul travelers like to combine more than 2 or 3 destinations in one go. But what we are going to see after when we're opening a border, lot of mono destinations will be getting a benefit out of this, because again, due to the restrictions or some of the regulations within those countries differ. So what the travelers going to do is that at least they go for particular destinations, stay there longer, since they already know, familiar with the particular destinations. These are the rules and regulations. So chances of those tourists combine more than 2 destinations getting lesser and lesser, so that those particular destination can offer more than just sightseeing. So we're expecting the tourists, when coming to particular destinations, they will indulge in a more experiential holidays. That's we're going to spike on that. And we can see some of the products, especially the eco-related product and all those things, will go to benefit from this kind of tourists.
All right, thanks for sharing your point, Manoharan. Now, as we all been saying, the pandemic really has disrupted traveling. It changed the look of travels. And even maybe like the tourism sectors are looking to sort of pivot into the new norm of traveling. So Johan, what do you think would be the trends of traveling in the coming months or years? Do you think that traveling will actually change, to become more outdoorsy or eco-friendly traveling, because of the whole pandemic?
Honestly, I don't have a crystal ball with me, so it's kind of hard in order to actually tell that actually in earnest. But if you're asking me anyway, my recent discussion with Mr. Bowman as well as Mr. Manoharan, he said that it's easy for people to fall back to the travel rhythm. So I think people would want, in order to actually go back to where it was, to traveling like it was before. However, in the immediate few months, people are going to be still being very cautious. People will still actually would want to know whether or not the place where they're heading to is actually going to be safe. So I foresee that if you would like, in order to do spontaneous drop of a hat, kind of traveling, domestic will be the best. Suddenly actually you have a long weekend and you don't want to actually have the trouble of having to familiarize yourself with different kind of protocols or different kind of requirements for in other countries. You actually end up having, traveling within your country, you do end up actually doing domestic tourism. So domestic tourism, so tour operators in Malaysia, for example, can target those markets more aggressively. Try to get all these people who are actually travelers who actually do that on spontaneous kind of actually, they plan spontaneously or prefer in order to actually spend their holidays at home. And if one were to actually travel overseas, like I said before, you have to make sure anyway that you have enough in your budget. For example, I'd like to take an example of Cambodia, because Cambodia, compared so far from what I understand, Mr. Bowen can try to actually correct me if I'm wrong, but so far Cambodia as well as Philippines are the most with the least restrictions, correct? I mean, they don't actually ask any PCR test, or they don't require you for you to do any tests once you actually enter their country. But when you want to go back to Malaysia, you actually have to have PCR test, so there is that element of risk. Like, for example, if I were to go to Cambodia, I don't have to actually bother about testing. I can simply just have fun over there. By the time I come back to Malaysia, and I would like, in order to do, and I'd like to have to enter Malaysia, I have to do the test. And if it turns out that I'm actually positive, COVID positive, I have to actually automatically, God forbid, have to actually do another, have to actually isolate myself, okay, an additional cost, all right? So people actually going, so that is a concern for me, actually. I am looking at places whereby I do not need, in order to go, to do too much testing, or I do not need, in order to actually worry about too much requirements and all these things. I can go there with peace of mind. So, but then again, it all depends actually on the country. I'm sure that it's because of the fact that Malaysia would like, in order to remain safe. That's why they put on all this kind of safeguards or controls, hence the PCR test. But it would be nice, I mean, I've already received my booster vaccination. So it would be nice if, based on the data anyway, that says, they say that people with have been boosted, they have lower risk of the severity is actually far lower, and most probably would not actually be as infectious as those actually with only 1 or 2 doses of vaccination. So those who have been boosted anyway can simply enter the country without having to undergo any test. Now that's a wishful thinking, I know, but if you actually like try in order to look at those things, that would help travel. But as long as those things are in place, people are actually going to be quite wary to travel overseas, and people might prefer in order to travel domestically. Well, that's actually like based on what I gather from my contacts, from my circle, as well as my own personal experience.
That's right. That's actually something that I also, it's definitely not wrong, because I also feel the same way, you know, like when it's still so fresh, we haven't traveled for like 2 years, all of these sort of tests and the possibility actually of testing positive for COVID before your holiday can actually end it right there. So speaking about this, you know, this anxiety, people want to know, is it actually safe to travel now?
I think it is safe, provided that, I mean, it's you really actually have to assess. That's the thing. Anyway, before you actually go to any place, you really have to assess whether or not that place is actually you're willing enough to take that risk. If it's worthy enough in order for you to take that risk, you know, because you'll end up actually like having to pay a lot more. Like I said just now, travel actually will cost a lot more. Therefore, the places where you actually going to spend a lot more, you're actually going to expect a lot more from it. You want actually to get back you want to actually get back the value of your money of traveling. So you will definitely actually, well, common sense. You'll definitely want to try to need to do the research first of all. And once you're there, I'm sure you're actually going to take precaution as much as possible to make sure anyway that you remain safe. Okay, that's actually what I would normally do, or a lot of people who actually have experience traveling would want to do that anyway. They would like in order to remain safe. Places that actually they'll go, they make sure that those places are safe in the first place, and then they take precautions anyway to ensure anyway that they remain safe. I like, for example, personally, I've been Bali's already open. It's one of my favorite places. Of course, as a Mahanuran, I'm also actually like to travel around Malaysia. Yeah? I mean, Sabah, Sarawak, as well. But Bali is also open. So I'm actually quite excited about going back to Bali, but it's not going to be immediate. I'm actually going to wait until what actually happens, transpires post 1st April. Hopefully by then, a lot of teething problems relating to this opening of borders and everything have been actually smoothened out. So I think, yeah, that's actually where things are actually heading to. The safety of the place will be a concern, but people are actually looking forward in order to travel, no doubt.
I think, Maya, Johan makes really, really interesting points, particularly about domestic travel. I mean, we have to be honest, the virus hasn't gone away, you know, and the numbers are still relatively high around Malaysia. So if you're traveling domestically in Malaysia, you still have the potential that you could contract COVID-19. The difference, of course, is that you can get back more easily. You can get hospital treatment more easily if you need it, or you can just isolate in your hotel and go home. Once you're overseas, there is obviously that fear factor that you won't be able to get back. But I think one of the issues for domestic tourism we're going to have to approach as more international tourists come back is pricing. You know, we've all been very lucky over the past 2 years to travel around Malaysia. We've had discounted fares, we've had discounted flights, we've had discounted hotel and resort rates. But will those endure in future once international tourists come back? And that could be, you know, that could impact our ability to travel domestically to have the experiences that we've had over the past 2 years. So I think that's an issue that we probably have to think about as well.
But again, Gary, in terms of pricing, I believe this, again, it will be taking a couple of months to correct themselves, because right now accessibility is an issue. You know, whenever less accessibility, definitely the airfares is going up. Yeah, and again, in terms of the inventory, the capacity of the hotels to undertake the demand. Right now, all of us know about it, whereby most of the hotel running between 40 to 50% capacity. They can't open the entire inventory due to the demand is not there. And again, the manpower, which I believe within a couple of months, all these things will be sorted out, and there will be more supply. Then again, this will be again attractive proposition for the consumer to choose their destinations. But right now, I believe the pricing will be another factor when they are choosing their destinations. I think all over the places, it's not only in Malaysia particularly, most of the places, there will be an issues in terms of pricing because of the accessibility. Once the border is closed, airspace are closed, most of the airlines are not flying. As a matter of fact, in Malaysia, looking at our national carrier, most of the flights is a very limited destination they are flying in to Bangkok. Within ASEAN, for the matter, not many flights is putting up there, But once the airspace is open, more flights will be there, more supply will be there, then we are spoiled of the choices, where you want to travel.
Mr. Manoharan, what is the Tourism Malaysia and the industry players actually doing to promote or to attract tourists after the borders reopen on April 1st? Are they ready?
Yes. In fact, the last 2.5 years, we have done more than 100 over webinars engaging our travel industry players locally as well abroad. Most of our overseas office abroad, we have more than 30 overseas office. They're regularly engaging with the industry players because it's out of sight, then out of mind. So what we've done it is that we are getting our local industry player like hoteliers, product owner, and all those things, keep on updating our own travel partner abroad, whether we are updating from frontliners, updating the tour operators, new things, new product, new destinations we can explore. As a matter of fact, during the pandemic, a lot of new destinations, new product has emerged. And we find out that quite a number of our products can be promoted in overseas, which is again, previously we neglected in saying that they may be familiar with Kuala Lumpur, or familiar with Penang, Langkawi, and all those things. We realize there's a lot of more products in Gopeng that you can promote it to international tourists. We have a lot of the other product in East Coast, which we can promote it. So all those things we have updated our industry players abroad. So we believe once the border is open, more demand we can create, and we have more choice to offer. Again, a lot of those products which we categorize previously as a support product, support packages, for instance, gastronomy. Today, we believe the gastronomy, culture, and arts will become one of the main products to be promoted. Earlier, maybe, by the way, when they are holiday here, within 4 or 5 days, just wanted to do a food tour, along the packages. But today, we believe all those products which is related to arts and culture will have a good demand from overseas travelers. Yeah.
Yes, I guess that's really the silver lining sort of the pandemic. I personally have enjoyed traveling within Malaysia, my own country. Actually for Under Tourism Malaysia, I was in the East Coast, and I was also traveling to Ipoh, Penang, and whatnot. And I really, really saw a lot of hidden gems that, in fact, I didn't know existed before this. So that's definitely the silver lining. All right, so moving on to insurance, all right? Because insurance is now, I feel, more important than ever with COVID still around. So as I believe Gary mentioned just now, that most travel insurance, or was it Johan? Travel insurance would cover the cost of hospitalization, but it doesn't cover the cost of quarantine centers without medical treatments. How do we actually plan for proper insurance for even international travelers coming into Malaysia and also for overseas traveling?
Basically, what I have in mind is that when you talk about insurance, I think it's actually getting a lot more important that we actually start to look into taking travel insurance wherever you're heading to. But then again, like I said before, anyway, to those travel insurance provided by the airlines, they do not actually cover anything that's related to COVID-19 travel disruption. So you need another additional cover for that one. Like I said before, anyway, I took actually the Etika travel disruption insurance. So that one actually helped in order to actually cover the cost of my my quarantine when I was actually in Dubai. But then again, it actually takes time in order for you to get back the money. So but so I think it's best in order for you to actually have, like I said, you have to make a lot of research again. You have to actually look into the kind of insurance. Some insurance, travel insurance, might actually give that COVID-19 travel insurance cover. Some may not. Some may only cover hospitalization. Some may not actually cover. Some may not. So I think it's best in order for you to actually like look into the fine print and be very vigilant on what kind of risks that you actually have to face when you travel overseas.
Yeah, I think another point aside to the insurance as well is that airlines are starting to offer lots of different pricing for their flights now. So there are a lot of flexi options, for example, that enable you to rebook if you have to cancel at short notice. I think it's going to be increasingly vital that a lot of people will take that, but obviously the price for that is going to be much higher than it is for a standard budget flight. So yeah, that comes back into the point that Juhan said earlier about budgeting isn't just about insurance, it's not just about your travel. There are so many other considerations now, and certainly when you purchase your flight ticket, you really need to look at what the options are if you need to cancel before you travel or while you're away and you need to rebook. I think that's going to be something we all have to get used to.
So now we're starting to take some questions from the viewers. Ramaro Rama Naidu actually asked, how safe are fleets if they've been grounded for 2 years, cruise ships and whatnot? Anyone would like to take this?
The question is about the cruise ship, is it?
Yes. What's the future on?
Oh, I think in terms of the fleets of the airlines, I believe the airlines, before they start operating their fleets, they have regularly tested and all those things. Most of the airlines not only grounding the fleets without being airborne and all those things. Once you're not airborne, there's been a difficulty. So most of as far as I know, most of the fleets which is within the supervisions of those airlines, they have been airborne, been tested before they start flying in on the journey. So in terms of safety, yes, I mean, it's happened. What is happened in China and all those things, but we shouldn't take it that as what do we call it, as a benchmark. Most of the fleets are not safe. The airlines definitely, because the safety of the customers is ultimate. So to say that, the fleets are safe, yes, that is one of the priority of the airlines before even they start operating to the destinations.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Manharan. I mean, one of the reasons, if you look at the airlines' balance sheets over the past 2 years, they've been hit so hard, and one of the biggest cash burns they've had is to maintain and to service their planes that aren't flying. It costs them a huge amount of money every single day, every single week. But they have had to do that. They have done that. So I don't think safety is going to be a concern. The more of the concern is how they actually overturn those losses. That's going to be a huge, and how those get passed on to consumers.
What about the airfares? Sometimes travelers have to pay for the empty seats. Is that still going to be a thing?
Well, initially, if you look at what's happening right now, there are two factors that are very, very important. Juhan mentioned this earlier, the rising prices of jet fuel over the next few months, those will get passed on to consumers. Some airlines have already said they're going to do that, AirAsia being one of those. But at the moment, there's some good discount deals out there. But, airlines want to get people flying again. They want to get you back on board. And at the moment, I think they're prepared to take the hits in terms of the flight costs. But as we start to see demand come back, then I think prices will start to increase. But at the moment, if you're booking, there are some quite good flights. But also Mr. Manharan made another good point, which is at the moment, it takes time to build those frequencies, and that impacts the price of a flight. When before the pandemic, we could choose to fly to Bangkok or to Hanoi or to Singapore several times a day. We had so many options about, when we would fly, and the prices were really good, especially if you wanted to fly during the middle of the day. At the moment, those frequencies of the flights aren't there. So it means that the prices are going to be a little bit higher for the initial period. But let's hope that the airlines can rebuild those flight frequencies, because that really impacts the price.
What is the current traveling attitude like right now? As some of us have been traveling domestically, within the country, are people traveling as per pre-pandemic? And are we expecting this to, improve within time?
Yes, it'll improve definitely, but in time. People will not stop traveling, but people will be getting a bit more cautious on where they're heading to, and then they would like, in order to be sure anyway that that wherever they're traveling to, the cost that they're actually going to spend is going to be value for money. So I think that's actually going to improve over time. And also that depends on the kind of restrictions that you're actually going to have. We'll talk about traveling overseas, international travel. When you actually once countries, let's just say like ASEAN manages in order to scrap entirely that, the testing, I think that's actually definitely going to make the whole travel scene vibrant again. That's my take on it anyway, but it's not going to be soon. It's going to take a few months' time down the road.
Yeah, I agree with what Johan said. Again, the type of people are traveling during after this pandemic. We're not going to see influx of a group departures, group arrival, whereby it's more on the FITs in the smaller groups, maybe traveling with a group of friends or family, which is again, traveling in a big groups, you need a bigger plans. And again, people are very cautious about this so-called a group departure, which is a fixed departure, how we call it in terms of in the travel industry. That will take sometimes. Maybe quarter of the year, we can see most of the group departures in some incentive movement and so on. But right now, it's more on the smaller group, FIT, because it's easily manageable within their groups. So if anything happens, you say one of them been contracted with the COVID and all things. So isolations in terms of putting them in a designated quarantine center and all those things, not going to be a big issues.
Right. I do have this one personal question, because I initially was planning to go to Bangkok at the end of this month. But then because of the confusion and the restrictions between Thailand and Malaysia, I decided to actually go to Perhentian, which is in Malaysia. So how do we actually address this right now? What's going to happen after April 1st? Will this still be an issue? Because I believe that Thailand still hasn't announced, to reopen borders completely to Malaysia or to other countries. And even the land entry points will only be expected in May, which is 1 month sort of plus from now. So anyone can take this question?
Okay, to survival of the tourism industry, it should be on a reciprocal basis. I have mentioned to Gary and Johan previously, it cannot be one-way trips. There are no any airlines will flying to particular destination and flying empty out of that. Just matter of time, the government will going to review that. As I mentioned, Malaysia is not only receiving people from abroad. We also is one of the big source market for Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, and so on. So we also expecting the same kind of a reciprocal from the other government. As you mentioned correctly just now, Singapore will going to look at it and maybe reviewing it. Maybe a couple of weeks, they're going to open up the border, allowing normal traveling between Singapore and Malaysia. So this also will happen to all the other our regional market. So right now, even though Thailand says they're going to opening a border for their own citizens to travel out of the country in the month of May, but I'm sure it will happen sooner than that.
Right, that sounds very exciting. Now we have a really good question by Dino. How are locals actually in Malaysia or in various popular destinations feel about travelers, international travelers coming back into the country, after so long of not seeing international people? How best to actually travel responsibly within this context?
When you're talking about travel responsibly, we are not talking about just safety and healthy aspect. I think when we talk about traveling responsibly, it's also actually when you go to a particular place, for example, if you go to somewhere foreign, make sure you understand the culture, the kind of culture that's actually the local culture as well. For example, if you go to Thailand, never actually touch other people on the head, for example, it does go a long way. And when I say actually like travel responsibly to those places, besides taking care of yourself, making sure you're healthy, that you don't actually infect other people, you're not actually like down with COVID, and on top of maintaining your hygiene, you also actually need to make sure that you're very sensitive to local culture. I find that is a big part of traveling responsibly. Besides also, when you go there, try to find a way to show that your presence there enriches that particular host community. And I think, all communities throughout the whole world are very welcoming to outside travelers, as long as they do actually, they are very sensitive, they understand the local culture, they don't offend people actually staying there. They do not actually like litter, they do not actually bring things anyway that are not that are actually against the norms of the people of the place. So I think people actually are going to be open to outside travelers, as long as they travel responsibly, and understanding the culture, understanding the people that stays there is actually a huge part of the equation.
I agree with Johan entirely. I think another issue also is understanding not just the culture and the norms, but the different rules that we've had in place in different countries over the past 2 years. Many countries, particularly in Europe, they don't have the kind of strict regulations that we've had here in terms of using QR code, Mysajatra, mask wearing all the time, particularly outside. Those rules may change. But upholding these rules for travelers coming in from Europe is going to be quite difficult because they're just not used to it. And it's the same as when we go to Europe. We probably have to get used to a greater freedom that is quite different for us. Even in Asian countries, the rules are slightly different. So we'll have to get used. For example, I don't know what the current rules are if I'm traveling in Bangkok. I don't know what the current rules are if I'm walking down the street in Singapore. We're going to have to get used to this fact, as Johan said earlier, that part of our travel research now is understanding this transition into the new travel era, what that actually means. And that's not just about cost, that's about our own time and resources and understanding, so that when we do arrive in a country, we can hit the ground running and we can be respectful to whatever the situation is, wherever we go.
Yeah, still on this topic of understanding culture and the rules and regulations of a specific country, we have a question by Zeti. Where can we actually get the information of what's the exact SOPs and requirements of this country? That's still unclear in terms of the SOPs of each country.
Okay, I think in terms of SOP for Malaysia, you can get it access to all the Tourism Malaysia's websites as well. We have put it up, the SOP on these immigration sites, and all our missions abroad. They do have. We keep on updating all those new SOP, new rules and regulations by MOH or whichever be gazetted by the government. We updated that regularly. And again, we also contact the airlines, because airlines normally they're the first person of engagements when they want to book the tickets and all those things. So all those updated SOP will be uploaded for the entire industry players, so they can get access from there. The main source will be Tourism Malaysia's website. They can get it done, and they also can go through all the other relevant websites, as I mentioned just now too.
Yeah, I think as travelers, we'll be relying on the official sources, such as Mr. Manoharan said, like Tourism Malaysia or Thailand or wherever you're traveling to. But I think increasingly we'll all rely on social media. We'll rely on our friends, the key opinion leaders that are traveling, and what they're experiencing, how they're finding, what they're learning about each destination. I think we can become very reliant on that in this new era for our own understanding, and not just what the rules are, but how you actually apply those in your day-to-day travel. So I think social media is going to be really important.
Social media is definitely the best source of information right now, but also be sure to check, like Gary's mentioned, the official sources, and perhaps the immigration and whatnot if we need to call just to confirm. There are more questions here. Ramaro wants to know, a question for Manoharan, are we doing enough to promote local tourism? I believe we are, but what more can we do?
When he's mentioning local tourism, it's more on the domestic tourism. I believe the domestic tourism is one of the savior during the when we close the border. As a matter of fact, when we open the inter-district traveling and those things, for instance, Langkawi, when we open it up in the month of September, most of the hotels are full. People really eager want to travel when the inter-district's been lifted up. And domestic tourism is very, very important. During these COVID periods, we realized that the domestic tourism is the one support the entire travel industry so that they can have a breathing period during the period. And we have, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of new destinations which has hidden gems. As you correctly mentioned just now, Mia, a lot of hidden gems has been promoted. A lot of state government, we can load of the local authority on those things. Everybody is come on board and work together to promote their destinations. And we have engaged a lot of our local KOL and influencers and all those things to promote those destinations among the Malaysians. And we encourage a lot of people, the Malaysians, to travel within the countries. A lot of from Kuala Lumpur to Kuala Lumpur within 1.5 hours journey. A lot of destinations you can discover. For instance, Kuala Selangor. So many people haven't seen the sky mirror in Kuala Selangor. It's very surprising. It's just 1.5 hour ways from Kuala Lumpur. So a lot of the other destinations, together with our state tourism body, we have promoted through our local agents and encouraging the local tourism to travel within the country. And from government's part, we have supported a lot of our local industries people under the what we call it package rancangan economy, so that they can sustain the operations. And we also have given a number of grants so that they can keep on open up their business and getting the local people to travel and enjoy the destinations within Malaysia.
I kind of agree. Sorry. I agree with Mansaran. I hope I can add a bit more on that. I don't think actually it hurts if we could further intensify that domestic tourism because I noticed that there are a lot of actually KOLs, people who are actually like public, who themselves are actually becoming social media savvy, especially among the young. And they are the ones who are actually very much, they are very adventurous and they actually go to places that, they're off the beaten path. They're actually the ones who actually kind of opened up new places where even Malaysians don't even know themselves. So I think it would be nice if you actually like give a lot more platform to all these people, to KOLs, to all this new generation of travelers who are willing enough to go to places and then also record their own experiences through social media. I think engaging them will be a good way also in order to actually to take them actually as part of the promotional efforts.
Right. I agree with that point. But I do have another question. What about collaborations with maybe international or ASEAN tourism industry players? What do you think about that? Maybe packages and whatnot, maybe to attract more international travelers to come to Malaysia and also the other countries around Malaysia.
Oh, that is ongoing, in terms of ASEAN countries, especially for the long haul market. We have what we call it APCT, ASEAN Promotional Chapter. Most of the ASEAN countries working together to promote ASEAN destinations for the long haul markets when they travel to this part of the world. So all the destinations been combined, so they can enjoy more than one destinations when they're traveling this part of the world. That is ongoing process. And besides, we're working closely with the airlines, working closely with our travel partner abroad to promote destination as a whole. Previously, when the cruise operations was in Singapore, so a lot of promotions we done in. Of course, they're flying to Singapore and take the cruise. But again, a lot of our port in Malaysia has become a port of call. Penang, Malacca, and Klang, and Langkawi for the matter. So we did benefit from those cruise operations. Right now, of course, Star Cruise has been ceased operations, but nevertheless, the other cruise operator which is operating like a Royal Caribbean and all those things, and we work closely with the other NTOs. So the collaborations among the NTOs mean the National Tourism Organizations like TAT, STB, and Tourism Malaysia, we do collaborate and work closely to promote the destinations. That's ongoing process, yeah.
Right. Although we have so many more questions to ask and doubts to reassess. But we have only a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to ask on behalf of Zulkifli Amiruddin, will the PCR test be lifted for people to travel within Malaysia anytime soon?
It's $1 million question. I think yes, I do think it will be, but I wouldn't like to say when. I think we're going to test this process first, see how it works, and perhaps later in the year. But I don't think it will be immediate. Mr. Mahnaran may have a different view.
No, I'm agree with you, Gary, because we had to test it. This, we also don't allow anybody coming to the country without doing any tests. But again, government going to review if there is no any spikes. People who are coming after the vaccinations and boosters and all those things. I mean, if there are no any cases, maybe a couple of months, 3 or 4 months down the line, definitely the government will review. Because the main objective is that we want people to travel when you're taking a holiday is hassle-free. So again, the PCR test and RTK test at the moment remain, but definitely the government will review if there are no any cases. Maybe they can lift it up. Maybe second, third quarter or fourth quarter of the year. But at the moment, yes, we still need to do the test accordingly.
A little bit more on airport preparation, because we know that people are a little bit afraid or hesitant when they go to crowded spaces like the airports or airplanes. How do we address these concerns? What is the preparation right now in KLIA and airports in Malaysia?
But I believe, to address those questions, our airports now, if you go to the airports, then you can see a lot of those SOP has been implemented at airports. Less kind of interactions with the airport staffs. A lot of self check-in has been implemented. More on the digitalizations have taken place. The advantage what will happen during the COVID reset, more and more authorities, more the industry players has adopted the digital element into it, applications, app, and all things. So you can do your self check-in, you just print out a boarding pass, and you just go to the boarding gates and all those things. So airport have taken a lot of measures, safety measures, to ensure that the safety of the passengers who's traveling is not being compromised. Yeah. Similar go to airlines and all those stuff. So I think on the safety elements, most of the airports, especially in Malaysia, some Malaysian airport authorities are working very closely to ensure that the safety of customers is being taken care.
Thank you for answering that question. Now, before we end this session, would any of you gentlemen would like to give any tips to potential travelers in the next month or so? Tips or advice?
Yeah, advice, over budget, make sure anyway you actually have that. If you're traveling overseas, since you actually have to do the PCR test on the way back, just anticipate the fact that what happens if you actually were to do quarantine overseas. So, or otherwise, if you want to have hassle-free, I'm talking about holidays, if you want to have a hassle-free travel, stick domestically. That's all I can say anyway from my point.
Again, for the international travelers, as Johan mentioned earlier, a lot of insurance being offered. So we wanted to ensure that when you're choosing a particular insurance, ensure the insurance covered the entire quarantine period, not only for hospitalizations. And I remember one of those Astros people said when they're traveling to foreign destinations, when they said quarantine, if you quarantine in the hotels, it's not covered under the insurance policy. So advise that when you're choosing the insurance, choose the right insurance so that all the hassles, you need to fork it out, your advance payment before you have to do a reimbursement, all those things can be avoided.
Okay, I'll be a little bit more upbeat, Mia. I would say to international travelers, come as soon as you can. Come in April, come in May, because it'll be quite quiet. There won't be huge amounts of travelers yet. You can go and see all the places that you want to see. It'll be much quieter. There won't be as many crowds. Maybe the hotel rates will be slightly cheaper. So the sooner you come, the better experience you'll have.
I hope we answered all of your questions about traveling in and out of the country. To all the viewers, do not forget to give us 5 stars, and also check link.astroawani.com for more insightful workshops similar to this one. And once again, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining Astro Awani on this Thursday afternoon. It was a pleasant time speaking with you all, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
Thanks,
Thank you
Mia.
so much. My name is Soraya Mia, and we'll see you again in the next episode.